What is the probability of being correct if you have 10 possible answers? Well, you might say that depends, but presuming you're not given any other information, it's 10%. Technically more than few good projections of my psychology, but if we assume that whatever generated it had no such biases, well, it's 10%. Now, what if we swap these for given political positions? Now, obviously, these do not exist in a vacuum, I'm aware, but this is from the first person perspective, and we'll get back to that in a second actually, because this is probably the most important point in the video. A lot of the later conclusions hinge on it, but firstly, looking at it from just the third person perspective without being given any other information, it obviously isn't overly high, but going further, imagine that instead of 10, all the acceptable opinions, ideologies, philosophies in the West were present. Now imagine, what if we measure that against the acceptable opinions in other civilizations, let's say China, India, and I don't know, Afghanistan, although calling it a civilization might be a bit of a stretch. Going even further, what if you take into account all that existed throughout all of history? What if you take into account all that could exist, including very, very alien civilizations? Yeah, I think you kind of get the point. With so many different possible answers, the probability of any being correct is nil. Thankfully, we don't have to choose blindly. Our first person perspective allows us to look for evidence and reason what is right and wrong. The end? Well, as you can tell by the ranks, not exactly. You see, I didn't mention one really important calculation that turns this whole thing on its head. But firstly, as previously mentioned, I'm not talking about like all opinions and beliefs, as not at all are we so emotionally biased. Some are rigidly proven like math, or at least most of it, always selected to be right about them as they benefit our societies. Now that that's out of the way, we can get to the actually important question. What makes you so confident in your first person perspective? Like, they are smarter, more open-minded, more knowledgeable, more logical, less biased people who do more research on these topics, who disagree with you on all of your opinions and beliefs, even if individually, though I'm sure there are ones who do or did on all of them simultaneously. I mean, think about it this way. If you were an extra-dimensional entity that for some reason had to adapt a worldview of a human, would it really be us? I'll get to the possible counter-arguments in a second, but let me just quickly clarify the statistic. Using political opinions as an example, even in just the West, left, right, and center would have at least 100 million people each, and for lack of a better alternative, let's use AQ as an example, 134 or more is about 100 people only. Do you think you'd even get that high? I'm aware this might all sound kind of harsh, but keep in mind this isn't specifically targeted towards you, it more or less applies to all of us. Now, as a counter-argument, you might say something like, okay, but how else am I supposed to form opinions if not from a first-person perspective? And, like, there's many ways I could answer this, but two most important are that I never state that you can't, or that you shouldn't, just that in the grand scheme of things, its validity is questionable. And also, like, this is not a counter-argument, or at least its validity is disconnected from my previous claims. You might not have a choice, but also might be unlikely to be correct. Though keep in mind, like, right and wrong here are a little questionable, as most topics are not binary, so if you think of them like spectrums, how large of a difference between you and the truth has to be before you'll consider yourself to be wrong is somewhat questionable. And now you might say, okay, let's assume you're right. Like, what are you trying to say? What are basically the implications of this, and are there any solutions? Well, the answer to the last is partially yes. You see, the point of this video, besides just getting those conclusions out, and I kind of had to make a video about something, is that we probably should all be a little more open-minded, as the sheer confidence or arrogance, really, that a lot of people have in their own opinions and beliefs is statistically questionable at the very least, insane at worst. Even outside of these videos' calculations, when you look at how unreliable brains are from a scientific perspective, just that should give you second thoughts. And I know these are just ChatGPT summaries, but it's because there's just too much of it. In my previous videos, I went and verified the individual sources to differing degrees admittedly, but here, even if a few were wrong, it wouldn't change the bigger picture. Now, as for the solutions, there are two main ones, and the simplest is to improve your chances of being correct, which in theory is simple. You become more open-minded, logical, knowledgeable, and sharpen your mind as much as you can at the very least. Again, in theory, simple. In practice, how much can you realistically improve them though? I mean, the only one after all that might not require time, at least on the surface, is becoming more open-minded. Still, it's better than nothing. The second solution solves all of these problems more, though it wasn't necessarily created for this specific topic per se. It also has its own unique drawbacks, as you're about to see. I call it the greatest system of logic, and it's comprised of two steps. So the first is to find what makes an argument counter-argument logical and how to construct multi-argumental structures. The second is to note them down within a given topic to conclude objectively is the current, emphasis on the current, answer. Basically combining the knowledge and logic and intelligence of many individuals, which is always going to be more reliable than the judgments of an individual. Unless we're talking about like super individuals, but this video isn't really covering like superhumans, transhumans, singularities, hive minds, and so on and so on. And of course, all of that was just a summary. The actual system and its implications are too large for me to cover here, and obviously this is not a short-term solution. It also requires the underlying lesser system of logic, so the mathematical-like approach to argumentation. Basically, for now, all you can do is try to improve your chances of being right, and accept that you are, in fact, we all, are gonna be wrong about some things. the best we can do is minimize them.